When missionary Etta Wheeler encountered 8-year-old Mary Ellen in 1873, the child was visibly abused. In trying to rescue her, Wheeler came into conflict with the laws granting parents absolute authority over their children. In crafting a compromise, Wheeler turned to the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to save the child. National outrage over the case led to the first protection laws for children. After the Civil War, one of the most gripping of New York's social problems was the abandonment of infants in the streets of the city. Poverty, immigration, inadequate housing, and a financial depression were the factors which made abandonment more present than ever. In 1896, it had no longer become news, or even something of interest, to find an abandoned infant on the doorsteps of a rich family, in the hallways of a tenement, or at the entrance to a convent. St. Peter's Convent on Barclay Street was a favorite refuge of distraught mothers, and very often the sisters, upon opening the doors in the morning, would find an infant placed on their doorstep. Sister Mary Irene of St. Peter's Convent called the attention of Mother Mary Jerome, the superior of the Sisters of Charity, to the need of rescuing these children. When the matter was placed before Archbishop McCloskey, he not only granted permission to the Sisters of the Convent to create a place that provides an asylum for the care of abandoned children, but urged the sisters to put the plan into execution. With only $5 as capital, but with undaunting courage and unlimited faith and confidence in God, Sister Irene undertook the work. On October 8, 1869, the New York Foundling Asylum of the Sisters of Charity in the city of New York was incorporated. This was the beginning of the child welfare reform in America. The New York Foundling Asylum was created in an era of minimal child welfare bureaucracies, when newborns were routinely abandoned on the mean streets, in church entrances, or the doorsteps of the wealthy. It was a time when an estimated 30,000 homeless children populated the city. One of these children was a little girl by the name of Mary Ellen Wilson. Mary Ellen was a 10-year-old little girl who lived on West 41st Street in the Hell's Kitchen section of Manhattan, New York. Mary Ellen was one of the first children to put a face on child abuse in America. When Mary Ellen was still an infant, she was orphaned. Her father was a Union soldier who died in the Second Battle of Coal Harbor in Virginia. Her mother boarded Mary Ellen with a woman living on Mulberry Bend on the Lower East Side, while working double shifts as a laundress at the St. Nicholas Hotel. At the time, when a man died in battle, the United States paid families a pension. The pension did not cover the $2 a week cost of Mary Ellen's boarding. Her mother could no longer afford to care for her daughter, and was forced to place her in the city orphanage on Blackwell's Island. After living in the orphanage for a few years, Mary Ellen was adopted by a couple from Manhattan, Thomas and Mary McCormack. Soon after the adoption, Thomas died, and Mary McCormack remarried Francis Conley. Unhappy with her marriage, Mary McCormack took to physically and mentally abusing the little girl. The abuse soon attracted the attention of neighbors. They complained to police, but because it was inside the home, they couldn't do anything about it. The Conleys then moved, but when a missionary by the name of Etta Wheeler stopped by the old tenement building, the neighbors told her about the brutality. At the new address, Etta had come across Mary Smith, an old terminally ill woman and a neighbor to the Conleys, who told Etta about the horrific things she heard across the hall. Soon after hearing Smith's testimony of the little girl, Etta went to go greet the Conleys to see if she could get a glimpse of herself, of the mistreated child. Etta Wheeler introduced herself to Mary Conley and was able to see Mary Ellen in all of her sadness. The 9-year-old was filthy and visibly malnourished. She was dressed in raggedy clothing and had bruises and scars along her bare arms and legs. I was there only long enough to see the child and gain my own impression of her condition. I saw a pale, thin child, barefoot, in a thin, scanty dress, so tattered that I could see she wore but one garment besides. She was a tiny mite, the size of 5 years, though, as afterward appeared, she was then 9. But the saddest part of her story was written on her face, in its look of suppression and misery, the face of a child unloved, a child that had only seen the fearsome side of life. Miss Etta Angel Wheeler. From that moment on, Etta Wheeler made it her civil duty to save little Mary Ellen. What, in your viewpoint, made this case so important during the late 1800s, and how do you feel it's impacted society and the lives of children moving forward?
It actually was the turning point. It wasn't the first case of child abuse, and people say it was the first case of child abuse. It's not. It was the first case where a child was taken from their home and brought into court, and that was the important thing about the Mary Ellen case. If I was whipping a child on the street and a police officer came by and witnessed it, they can arrest me. That was illegal to beat up children back then. But you couldn't go in someone's home. Children were deemed to be the property of their parents. The parents owned the child, and so the sanctity of the home could not be violated. So that, overcoming that, being able to go into someone's home and take custody of a child because they're abused, that was the important part of the Mary Ellen case.
Etta's progress was slow. Angered and inspired, Wheeler sought the help of Henry Bergh, the founder of the ASPCA. Bergh realized that he would need some help with this case. So, he hired lawyer Elbridge Gerry, the grandson of Governor Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, who took the case to New York State Supreme Court. He sent a New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals worker, posing as a census taker, to check on her condition and to be a witness. Once the evidence had been obtained, it took only 48 hours to remove her from the home. When carried into the courtroom wrapped in a blanket on April 10, 1874, 10-year-old Mary Ellen was hysterical and feared her mother would punish her. During the trial, Judge Abraham Lawrence brought her into the courtroom and listened to her testimony that was published in the next day's New York Times.
My name is Mary Ellen. I don't know how old I am. I have never had but one pair of shoes, but can't recollect when that was. I have had no shoes or stockings on this winter. I have never had on a particle of flannel. My bed at night is only a piece of carpet stretched on the floor underneath a window, and I sleep in my little undergarment with a quilt over me. I am never allowed to play with any children or have any company whatever. Mama has been in the habit of whipping and beating me almost every day. She used to whip me with a twisted whip or rawhide. The whip always left black and blue marks on my body. I have now on my head 2 black and blue marks which were made by Mama with the whip, and a cut on the left side of my forehead which was made by a pair of scissors in Mama's hand. She struck me with the scissors and cut me. I have no recollection of ever having been kissed and have never been kissed by Mama. I have never been taken on my Mama's lap or caressed or petted. I never dare to speak to anybody because if I did, I would get whipped. Whenever Mama went out, I was locked up in the bedroom. I have no recollection of ever being in the street in my life.
On April 21, 1874, after 20 minutes of deliberation, Mary McConley was found guilty of felony assault and battery and sentenced to 1 year at hard labor in the penitentiary. The court was fully satisfied that she had been guilty of wanton cruelty. After the case, she was sent to live in a home for delinquent teenagers, but that did not last. Etta Wheeler took it upon herself to raise Mary Ellen with her mother and sister in North Chile, New York. Without the help of Etta Wheeler, not only would there have not been an impact in Mary Ellen's life, but there wouldn't have been an incredible impact in the world that there is today. Many government agencies and government associations are a direct correlation to Etta Wheeler's impact on the child abuse reform in America, including agencies such as the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as Guardian Ad Litem, and acts such as the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of 1974. Before the late 1800s, there were no laws to protect mistreated children, but now, because of some amazing people, we know that there is hope for our children after all.